Today, I want to talk about exaltations in the natal chart. So it'll be fun to see if you have a planet that is in what they call exaltation. So there's something called four dignities or essential dignities. And so I love how, because astrology has been around for thousands of years, the words and the naming of certain ways of looking at this visual astrology is still rooted in an old way of seeing oneself. So, essential dignities. So, we did talk about house rulership. That is something called being in domicile. Then, the opposite of domicile is being in detriment. Okay, so I'm hoping to do 4 separate little videos on each of the 4 dignities. Okay, so let's get started. The word exaltation, it's actually, it seems like it's a higher state of a quality in the birth chart when it pertains to a planet. Okay, so you're exalted. When you're at home or in domicile, let's say I feel at home, everybody knows me inside my house. But exaltation is going outside into the world where all your fans, the energy just wants to celebrate you. So if you have a planet in what's called exaltation, it means that that planet is being treated like a guest. But again, you're not in your home or hometown or home turf. You're actually a guest on foreign soil, so to speak. Okay? So the energy vibe can feel exaggerated or elevated for that particular planet. And it's a higher performing energy. I'll get down to the specifics, but overall, the term exaltation, when you hear it related to your birth chart, oh, my sun is exalted, or my sun is in domicile, or in detriment, or is falling. These are the words or the language that we use when we're talking about specific visual aspects to the astrology. All right. So I sourced this information from a source called the Tarot Lady. Gotta love that source, right? So she just goes back on, she continues to say, an exalted planet receives immense support from the host sign. So much of it is, where can I go to as a planet and feel like I will be celebrated? All right. So let's say my hometown is, let's say, America. But where can I travel abroad and feel like I'm being celebrated? That's how a planet feels. So a classic example is the moon in Taurus. So we know that the rulership of the moon is Cancer. But the moon is exalted when it is in Taurus. So that can be a transiting moon in Taurus or a natal, if you have a natal moon in Taurus, the sign of Taurus, it means that you have an extra special exalted moon. Another example that the Tarot Lady gives is your sun in Aries. We know that in domicile, or the rulership of the sun, is held here in the sign of Leo. Okay, Leo is fire. But when the sun goes into Aries, let's say you were born with an Aries sun, or the transit is having an Aries sun, that sun, the light of the sun, will be exalted. So I put a little crown, meaning exalted. Here's where you're in domicile or home. All right, remember I mentioned the sun is at home in Leo. However, the sun is exalted in Aries. You know, the sun will feel like it's being celebrated. And here's the crown overseeing all the foreign people. All right, now I don't want to get ahead, but the opposite of the exalted is for a planet to fall. I'm sorry, but if you were born with a Libra sun, you chose a pathway where your sunlight would be dimmed a bit because the sun just wants to shine, right? The planet, the sun, wants to shine. So with Leo at home, it roars. it goes into detriment in Aquarius. It kind of goes too far away from the sunlight. And so Leo is in like the hot months of August, whereas Aquarius is in the colder months of February. So this is how it plays. It depends on the sunlight, whether it's hot or cold. It's exalted in Aries, another fire sign, right? Leo is fire, Aries is fire. Where it falls is the opposite sign to Aries, which is Libra. And the reason it falls, as I was trying to say, it's falling because the sun just wants to shine brightly. And Libra, with the two scales, it's looking at both sides. Which way do I go? This or this? I see both sides. It cannot just shine its light. It's kind of dimmed, right? Is the time of the balance of light and dark. All right, so it's half this, half that. And the sun doesn't want to just share half its light. It wants to shine brightly. So in Aries, at the beginning of spring, oh, welcome back, sunlight. So Aries, it is exalted. All right. So what you're seeing here is my fascination and obsession with painting wheels, the astrology wheel. There's an archetype called keepers of the wheel in human design. And it's something that works strongly within my energy field. So it helped give me a sense of, oh, this is why I do what I do. All right. So to create an astrology wheel, the zodiac is divided into 12 equal parts. We're just using this as a learning wheel. All right. So in the previous lessons, we learned that the first house or the ascendant in red is fire. This is the Aries house. Taurus is earth. Gemini is air. And Cancer is water. So these are the first four personal houses. And the reason I put blue and pink, this is carrying masculine energy. So there's the yin and the yang. This is yang, masculine. Pink is feminine, the receptive, and that is yin energy. So yang, yin, yang, yin. That's my little color coding. Okay. So I don't want to keep going through the whole wheel because today it's about exaltation. So I have these fun little stencils that Catherine Costa sells through Stencil Girl. Anyway, you can see I've used these before, but I've never actually drawn one through. So to remind me that this is all about exaltation, I'm kind of liking this crown, and I'm using an ink black. Let me see, get my little glasses out. This happens with the wisdom process. Here we go. So I am just going to draw a crown. You can find all kinds of stencils online, or you can hand draw your own kind of crown. So I'm just putting this as a place marker because I have all these wheels running around. And when I look at the center, I go, okay, what kind of wheel? Reminding myself, are you? So I like to save these as a teaching guide. My mom was a grade school teacher, so, I helped her in the summer to teach children who didn't, English was their second language. I think some of that rubbed off on me. Anyway, I have a heart for teaching, especially for beginners. So my love for painting, my love for astrology, here we go. Rulership. All right. And I can improve that crown later. I'm going to probably spritz it with water, maybe even add some gold. Okay, there we go. This is all about rulership. Now, for those of you who already know astrology, but may have forgotten, where are the houses for, or excuse me, where are the signs for exaltation? So it's really the sign we're looking at. And let's see. So I'm looking for here's my other stencil with some of the luminaries. So I know, because I wrote to myself a note, the positivity and the planet power. If your sun, your natal sun, happens to be in Aries, okay, so Aries is the first house. Here I'm going to put the sun here. They would say that your natal sun is exalted in Aries. All right. We already know that the sun rules the fifth house of Leo. But if your sun happens to be in Aries, now here's the other cool thing. Just going to keep that as a circle. Here's the glyph for sun. Okay. And then I'm going to fill in. Sometimes stencils can't do that. You have to hand draw. Here we go. That is the glyph for your natal sun. All right. So if your sun is in Aries, did you know that on April 8th or 9th, and that's your birthday, 19 degrees of Aries, 19 degrees, it means it's a super powerful, potent sun. You have to look at the whole of your natal chart. But if you have a 19 degrees Aries, and when they say 19 degrees, they really mean 18 degrees through 19 degrees. Okay, it's one of these ways of cataloging. So I'm going to go ahead and write, use this other pencil. I'm just going to put 19 degrees and then Aries. All right. So let's see, I'll just write in Aries for those of you. There we go. So it's not if your sun is in the first house. No, it means if your sun, let's say, is in Aries, 0 through 30 degrees, you could have a sun in exaltation. But if you have 19 degrees Aries and were born, in that window of time, what did I say, April 8th or 9th, depending on where you are in the world, you could have an extra strong, exalted sun. Now, the sun is the strongest light in any natal chart. So to have a super, super strong sun like that would be interesting to see how your life has evolved, what you chose to celebrate as what we would call your identity, how you shine your light in the world, who you are, how you look. So there we go. So exaltation, the sun is exalted in Aries, but in particular, 19 degrees. And I'm going to put April 8th and 9th, depending on where you live. Because there's the northern hemisphere, there's the southern hemisphere, then there's time changes. Okay, so that's the first one. The sun is exalted in Aries. What's next? Let's look at the moon. Okay, let me find my glyph for the moon. Here it is. The moon is exalted in Taurus. So Aries, Taurus. Interesting to note that the sun and the moon stick next to each other. Here we go. I do this little moon glyph. You could lightly, pencil it in. Again, I'm going to probably come back to this and maybe add some gold. There we go. There's the moon. Now, I'm going to backtrack and tell you a little story of why is the sun exalted in Aries. Well, if you think about it, Aries is the beginning of the new astrological year. It's tied to the planting cycle. So like the farmer's almanac, right? So think about the beginning of the light's return from winter into spring. So the sun is exalted in Aries because it's finally coming out of winter. Now, so we're looking at, cardinal, the beginning of spring. Aries holds that cardinal energy. We look at the moon, Taurus. Okay, so we know that typically the moon rules, well, not typically, the moon does rule the sign of Cancer. That's over here. Okay, but it's exalted in Taurus. So check your natal chart and see, do you have a moon in Taurus? And, I'll go ahead because I think some of you might want to know what's the glyph again for Aries. I'll stick this. You can see these little shares are rather spontaneous and much more of an abstract thinker, non-linear. So there's Aries. Here comes Taurus. It's okay if it overlaps. Here we go. So Aries was the sign of the ram. This is the sign of the bull. Okay, here's the horns of the bull. Taurus. All right, the sign of Taurus. So if you have your moon in Taurus, pull that up. Let's stick this in. Your moon would be exalted. And I can pause and show you some charts where that would be applicable. I'm going to go ahead and close this in. So that's the glyph for Taurus. Sun is exalted in Aries. Moon is exalted in Taurus. Now, there is a special, okay, the moon travels around the zodiacal wheel, every day. So we would say that at 3 degrees Taurus is not only where the moon is exalted, but it's super, super exalted. Like that is the key point to receive the light of the moon. This speaks to identity. This would be emotional intelligence. How are you with your feeling state? As human beings, one of our best gifts, definitely given the gift of free will as the ultimate gift, but to be able to develop one's emotional intelligence is the moon. So the moon feeling into Taurus, the earth sign, 3 degrees. Now there's no special date on the calendar because the moon travels so quickly. The sun goes around all 12 zodiac signs in the course of 1 year, the moon every 28 days or so. So we'll just put each month the moon hits 3 degrees Taurus. Now, for those of you intermediate and advanced, you know that a transit to 3 degrees Taurus by the moon will make that moon exalted. So there could be a great time. If the moon is exalted, it's a potent moon. Wouldn't it be good to, I feel like, what do you feel like doing? What have you put aside? And I don't feel like doing that yet. But if the moon hits 3 degrees Taurus in a transit, and may aspect some great parts of your natal chart, this is something to watch. Okay, so those are the 2 luminaries, the sun and the moon. Let's see what we have now. We only have 7 planets that are exalted, but we have 12 zodiac signs. So the next one we're going to be talking about is the planet Mercury. Here, I found Mercury. Where do you think Mercury, the planet of communication and thinking and movement from all dimensions, the heavens to Hades? Well, Mercury, think about this advanced. Do you know where Mercury is exalted in a natal chart or in a transit? Mercury is exalted in Virgo. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses, Earth, green. This is Virgo. Okay, so I'm going to put the glyph for Mercury, this planet here. Grab my marker. Let's see. Mercury, remember he's got the winged hat. He could look a lot like Venus, but you'll notice his winged hat, the helmet that helps him fly with his winged sandals, are included in this glyph. So this winged helmet, that's how you know the difference between him and Venus, okay? Because they both have circle and then a cross, but he's got the little flying helmet ears. Mercury is exalted in Virgo. And what does Virgo's glyph look like? Here we go. Again, this is we're learning the language of symbol. This is shorthand for Virgo. You got a big M that I always associate with maiden, and then a fish. I always feel like the fish is there because she wants to be of service, which is very Piscean, which is the opposite to her. And she wants to be of service. Okay, here we go. So Mercury is exalted in Virgo. See how to read the chart? Okay, Mercury is exalted in Virgo. Now I'm checking my cheat sheet, and there's an extra potent Mercury. Here we go. At 15 degrees of Virgo. So look at your natal chart. If you were born 15 degrees of Virgo, that's typically on the day September 17th. Okay. So when I see this, I don't have Mercury in Virgo, but on a transit date on September 17th, I can look at 15 degrees Virgo when Mercury is exalted in the heavens. How is this 15 degrees Virgo going to impact my chart if I want to basically superpower my thinking, my communications? In Virgo, the sign of the daily, everyday habits, it's my body, exercise routines, the day-to-day, small animals. It's also the house of devoted service. So if I was trying to find the remedy to, if someone really needs care and you're trying to find out what's the exact, ingredients that need for their well-being and health, a little bit of, vitamin C, a little bit of tincture ABC, and, water that's been charged. This date, September 17th, when Mercury is exalted in Virgo, all of us have ability to tap into that energy. Also on April 8th and 9th, we can tap into that Aries sun, 3 degrees of Taurus, tap into that really feeling stable, feeling like, okay, I know the resources will show up. What is it that I want to do that's beautiful, or create something in Taurus? That's every month, just tracking when is the moon going to hit 3 degrees Taurus. All right, so now we've got 3 of the planets and their wonderful exaltation. So as we're looking at, here's the sun, we go, and then here's the moon, we do Mercury, and then the next one up is Venus. All right, let me get Venus back online. All right, so here's the question. Where is Venus going to find her exaltation? So first I think to myself, Venus, she is already the ruler of Libra, and she's the ruler of Gemini, okay? 2 air houses. But guess where she's exalted? She's exalted in the sign of Pisces. Over here, water, deep water, ocean water. So I bring Venus over here, okay, and get my little marker. Venus, interesting, right? So I have some pictures for you, which I'm not sure how I'm going to insert. Here comes Venus, and she is exalted in Pisces. All right. So when I saw this, I thought Venus exalted in Pisces. It reminded me right away of the famous painting by Sandro Botticelli of the birth of Venus. She was born fully, grown, and she arrives from the ocean on a clamshell. So the birth of Venus associated with the ocean. Oftentimes we'll think of Venus as Aphrodite playing with Cupid, or Psyche. We'll think of her playing or trying to help Mars calm down, Venus, Mars. But she's exalted in Pisces. That energy of all that is, as the glyph for love, for this kind of love, human love, love of the arts and creativity. All things began in the sea. We could say one Genesis story that life began in the ocean. And so if it was created in love, is the way that I can remember Venus is exalted in Pisces. All right, so let me get the glyph for Pisces. Keep this going. The ocean, where the drop of water returns and it becomes part of the ocean. Bring all that memory gathered from around the wheel, boom, Pisces. Venus is exalted in Pisces. All right, now here's the question. What degree and what date? Well, there is a degree. It's 27 degrees. Okay, Pisces is the super potent date. But remember, if you look at your natal Venus and it is in Pisces, you still have it exalted. It's just the 27th degree in Pisces is even stronger. This is a very positive love, nature, creation, all life. All right, and the date on the calendar is March 3rd or March 4th, depending on the time. Okay, so I'll just put a dash. So remember, all of us can access the Venus exalted in Pisces every year on March 3rd or March 4th, depending on where we are. But that 27 degrees Pisces point, that's interesting to note. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 more planets to go. Next up is Mars. Let's see if I can find Mars here. Okay, remember what the Mars glyph looks like? So we know that Mars rules Aries. We also know that Mars is the ancient ruler of Scorpio. So Mars works with fire, and the ancient ruler, Mars, works with that deep, still, fixed water. Where would Mars be exalted? All right, so let's look. Mars is exalted. Guess where? Mars is exalted in Capricorn, an earth house. So interesting how Mars goes from fire, water, and now he's going into being exalted. He is celebrated out in the world. Capricorn, mastery. Okay, so here's the glyph for Mars. Okay, it's the circle. And then an arrow. Like Mars wants to assert. Mars wants to make things happen. You know, so the positive side of Mars is just like, yeah, let's go, let's do it. So if you have Mars in Capricorn, how has it been with your career, your vocation, doing what you love? It's not always tied to money, like how successful were you? It's more like, wow, Mars in Capricorn, very potentized. Let's get the glyph for Capricorn. It's the sea goat. All right. So the goat goes steady up the mountain of success, step by step. And with Mars supporting it, wow, be interesting if anyone wants to comment. How has it shown up in your life if you were born with this? Okay, go. There's the stencil. Gonna finish the tail off. Here we go. So Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Let's see if there's a specific date. Well, first, it's a specific degree. 28 degrees Capricorn. I'll put 28 and then degrees Capricorn. Remember, it means 27 degrees to 28, basically. Okay, so if your Capricorn natally, I'm sorry, if your Mars natally is 27 degrees, 15 minutes, you have an exalted Mars in Capricorn. And what's the date on that? January 21st through 22nd. Okay, interesting, right? Is that your birthday? Did you check? Do you have an exalted Mars in Capricorn? Now, here's the thing I want to talk about. There are what's called cardinal points on the astrology wheel. And the whole wheel is tied to a certain time, it's the seasons. So, a cardinal energy on these points, so Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, these are cardinal signs. And so, this plays into why Capricorn is exalted. Remember, I said the sun, it's so happy to be out of winter. It's the first day of spring energy. Well, coming up here, we've got the stillness of winter, the darkest night. So we are working with the equinox, equal light, equal dark, the half and half. You know, Mars can assert itself with a cardinal degree with working with Capricorn. So, what I'm trying to say is there's not an accident, but there is a story of why Mars is exalted in the home of Capricorn energy. Okay, so equinox is balance of light and dark. And we're coming to the midway point. Okay, so this is spring, this is fall. And so the midway points of half and half, you know, Cancer, middle of summer, middle of winter. So interesting that Mars can really be exalted in the middle of winter. All right, so that's 3, 4, 5 planets that we've looked at. What are the 6th and 7th? We've got Jupiter and Saturn. All right, so let me ask the rhetorical question. Where is Jupiter exalted, everybody? Think about it. We're coming to another point of a cardinal point, and Jupiter is exalted in the cardinal sign of Cancer. So here we bring in Jupiter. I know this is just learning the stars speak or the language of astrology, and then you're also learning the imagery. So if it's a whole new language, just flow with it, okay? If you can just draw, if you prefer to learn by drawing, you know, you can put your little side notes, but Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Wow. And then let's see, the sign for Cancer is here. It's the crab. 2 little pinchers, 2 little eyes, settling along the side of the shoreline. The ocean meets the sand. Okay. Cancer. This is interesting because this energy is about home. And for Jupiter, the god of Mount Olympus, to feel at home, it's interesting, a water sign, right? So I would have thought he would be exalted in an air sign just because, you know, I think of airy, Mount Olympus, ethereal. But when you think about the water and the edge, I started thinking about some of the paintings when Jupiter, or Zeus was another name he would go by, would go into the ocean, see a maiden at the edge of the shore, and then basically turn himself into a bull and entice the maiden to come on his back. So there's very famous paintings of, excuse the term, but it's called The Rape of Europa. And there's a whole other, this is how things got started, the divine and the human. So Jupiter was always looking to create hybrids, finding beautiful earthly humans, though he was of divine essence. So this idea of the divine meeting the human in water, that's come up, and I started studying this. So Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. and it is at 15 degrees Cancer. And because it's so far out away from where we are, the Earth and the Sun, there's no exact date. It's just 15 degrees Cancer. If your natal Jupiter is, let's say, 14 degrees to 15 degrees of Cancer, you would look and you'd see, oh, my Jupiter, how I expand, how I navigate into this idea of faith and spirituality and leadership. You'd have an exalted Jupiter if it's in Cancer between 14 and 15 degrees. Interesting, right? So what we're learning is it's not just about by accident that these position points were just given willy-nilly, but there is something that's tied to the cycles of time and the seasons and planting and tracking the stars. All right, so the seventh planet, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The last one is Saturn. Where do you think Saturn would be exalted? We know that Saturn rules Capricorn, all right? And Saturn was the ancient ruler of Aquarius. So we've got Saturn and Earth and air. Where would Saturn, where would the energy say, yeah, we love you. Come, we want to celebrate you. We want to exalt you. Well, Saturn, interestingly enough, is exalted in this energy of Libra. Okay, so here's the sign of Saturn, exalted in Libra. Interesting, right? Here we go. Saturn. Then let me get my Libra. This is the scales, the balancing scales. Here we go. Remember we talked about the cardinal points. So Libra carries the energy. It's like October when I think of Libra. So late September, October. So it's the opposite of Aries. So Aries is the beginning of spring. Well, Libra is like the beginning of, moving us from the fall into the winter. So we're looking at the change in season. And here comes Saturn. Libra says, we'll exalt you. Isn't that interesting that this point of time in the season, Saturn comes in? And I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I loved spring and summer and maybe late fall. But as the season turned colder, there was this foreboding. I always felt like, like the silence of the cold, the darkening of the light. So Saturn is celebrated here. And I'll tell you what degree. It's at 21 degrees of Libra. Okay. And so there's no applicable date because, again, it's so far out in the heavens. So we really only have dates for the planets that are closer, like the personal planets, Mars, we got Venus, and then we have the two luminaries. So here's my next point. We often see Saturn and Mars as malefics. And so a malefic planet in the old speak is one that brings in a certain harshness. When a planet is malefic, it's going to challenge you. It's like the obstacle course. The benefic planets do the opposite. There's like ease and flow. So when we see a malefic planet like Saturn, when it's exalted in a natal chart, it softens the Saturn. It can soften if there's other aspects happening to the natal Saturn, just helps soften it. If you have a very strong Mars, being exalted in Capricorn, if your natal Mars is in Capricorn, it helps soften that aggressive behavior. So Mars would be at its worst, overly aggressive. Get out of my way. Saturn, to its worst nature, it would be so overly controlling and overly organized in structure that there's no air, there's no oxygen. Interesting that an air house would celebrate it. 21 degrees Libra. I'm just thinking here, it would be kind of fun to look up what are the Sabian symbols for each of those degrees. 21 degrees Libra for Saturn, 28 degrees Capricorn for Mars, 27 degrees Pisces for Venus, 19 degrees Aries for the Sun in Aries, 3 degrees the Moon in Taurus, or 15 degrees Cancer. It'd be fun to maybe pause and look at those Sabian symbols. All right, what else? So, in pulling some astrology reports, I noticed that there's one more planet. So here's the 7 planets, but one program, astro.com or Astrodienst, includes Uranus in the essential dignities. So, where is Uranus exalted? So, let's say I changed the crown into this little bit of a white so it could stand up a bit. But here's the glyph for Uranus. And Uranus is exalted in the sign of Scorpio. So Scorpio in Uranus. Now, the reason we usually stop with Saturn is because Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are typically what you call generational. It works for the whole collective. So there's a whole period of time when people were born into Uranus in Scorpio. Okay, so here's the glyph for Scorpio. And I wrote down, usually Uranus will spend about 7 years in every sign. So imagine that, 12 signs and 7 years in each sign. So 1975, if you were born like September 1975 through 1981, you more than likely have your Uranus in Scorpio, where it is exalted. Now, this generation can be looked at as Generation X, so the revolutionary change. Uranus represents the rebel, the maverick, change, suddenly changing. It's the future. And then Scorpio is deep and transformative. It's a powerful sign. Remember, it's triphasic. It can have 3 qualities: the scorpion, which stings with its poison, the eagle, which can look far and wide, have bigger perspective, and then the phoenix that rises from the ashes. So there's an intensity here in the sign of Scorpio that, Uranus will feel like, hey, welcome to the Scorpio house. Now, Uranus is typically, as you may know, the house ruler. It is domicile in the 11th house of Aquarius, an air house. So, but it's exalted here in the water sign of Scorpio. Again, that's like September 1975 to 1981. If you were born in that window of time, how has Scorpio, or how has your Uranus exalted in Scorpio shown up in your life? I mean, this is a big urge for like independent thinking. They call this the advent of, one of the qualities was the advent of the latchkey child, where instead of there's a mom at home to watch the kids, it's a double income family. And so the children born in this window of time, much more independent. That's very Uranian. And yeah, aren't going to do things in the conservative, traditional way. They're going to find their own path and they will tap into the powerful, potent energy of Scorpio. So the exaltation. Wow. All right. So again, 7 primary planets, and I've gone ahead and added Uranus because I found in some of the charts an astro